Thanks a lot for joining us today, and I think this is the penultimate session of the India Fashion Week. And we have esteemed panelists, all of them coming from large legacy brands, as well as a practitioner of building scale for D2C brands, Naveen Joshua. It's a privilege to be sitting here in front of you, to be talking to all of them, and talking about mapping Martech into marketing lifecycle. It actually, when I got the subject, I was actually thinking about, 6 months into the pandemic, who represents a SaaS platform which enables omnichannel retailing, we were doing a session where we had invited some retail experts in terms of how the pandemic had changed things and, what's the kind of shift that people are looking at in terms of consumer behavior. And there was one word that he said which stuck in my head, and I quote, he said, by 2025, the number of brands who will not be omnichannel will be 0. Now that's a powerful statement. We're talking of 2020. In 5 years, number of brands not being omnichannel is going to be 0. And it's not that omnichannel was not there earlier. It's not that digital and physical were not happening for brands. It's just that it was treated differently. And some conversations that we had outside. Brands were essentially looking at digital as a separate channel, and very few brands were essentially converging. The game is now completely changed. Consumer journey has changed, and as somebody just said in the session before this, it's not that digital is replacing physical. It's not like it's a substitute. It's more like a convergence point. That brings us to, when the consumer is changing, consumer is converging. What is the kind of challenge that marketers are facing, and how is Martech enabling that, right? The brands that we have today, they are people who have essentially stayed relevant. They have reinvented themselves. They have, looked at how is it, they've actually made an overnight shift in terms of how they market their products, and how do they create a seamless journey for their customers across any kind of a format where the customer is shopping from, exploring, product discovery, so on and so forth. So on that note, as I welcome the panelists, I will also start with my first question, which is, I think I'll open it to the panel, whoever would like to take it up. The first question is essentially to talk about what was the biggest shift that you saw, and what was the pivotal point that you saw where it said, now we need to change our marketing strategy? What were the kind of things that you did overnight in order to replace that? And what is it that you're seeing in terms of trends which are going to shape your future? So maybe, Rohini, you would like to start?
Yeah, so I think, like you already said, there's already been a journey that's been happening even before the pandemic. Consumers have been sort of moving more and more of their entire purchase journey online. But I think the pandemic was kind of like a shock to all of us, where it wasn't just a good to have, it's become a must have to be able to engage with our consumers in an omni fashion, no matter where they are, whether they're sitting at home in the comfort of their own homes with a mobile phone, or they're out in a mall looking to touch, feel and buy products. You have to make that journey seamless for them. You have to allow, and it's not just about the purchase, it's even before purchase, even when they're still in the pre-purchase stage, where they're still exploring brands, trends, alternatives to buy. You have to be engaging with them at every step of the way where they are present, whether it's on their mobile phones, whether it's physically at your stores, whether it's on mass media. So I think one has to take a 360-degree view of the consumer. One has to have the data to back it up, to know where to find them, how to reach them, how to communicate with them every step of the way.
Yeah, so, I mean, what were the kind of things that you had to change specifically with respect to that?
So I think in terms of, there were some more short-term changes that we had to do because, in the middle of the pandemic with all of our stores shut, we had very limited options for, at least reaching out to our consumers and selling to them. So there were a lot of short-term kind of initiatives that we did. We launched a WhatsApp commerce bot where people could, through a conversational format on WhatsApp, browse our collection and shop. We did Lifestyle on Wheels, which was a more physical version of it, which is actually vans with a limited selection going around. The other thing that we started doing is, Lifestyle actually has one of the most robust databases of customer in the country. And it's not just Lifestyle, we have it at a group level. So it's not just Lifestyle, it's Lifestyle Max, Easy Buy, Home Center. So we have a very large and very robust consumer database. So it was about how to really figure out how to get that consumer onto our online platforms. Many of them had never even been aware of the fact that lifestylestores.com exists. So how do I reach out to those people and let them know that just because our stores are shut, it doesn't mean all the great fashion we have to offer is still not available to them.
So Amit, would you like to share some light in terms of what happened, what change happened, and what's now shaping your future?
The biggest change which happened, Rasna, was that, the core of our business, which is the brick and mortar store, got suddenly shut. So that was our avenue to make sales. So suddenly, there was a big behemoth problem for us. A place where you do your sales is suddenly shut. The next problem that we faced was, the walk-ins or the customers coming into the stores were not up to the same level as pre-pandemic. So unless and until, you have that kind of a problem resolved, you cannot move forward. We had to make a lot of changes in our way of work. Okay, we had something called a SRM, a store relationship management, because each of our store is more like a SBU, can sustain on its own. So suddenly there was a complete outlook to be driven from a back office. You see, it was always there, but a complete responsibility which comes to the back office was not there. And the second thing is, you can do a collaboration with a player like, who can help us develop this omnichannel kind of an integration. But at the same time, we needed to train our staff to fulfill those activities. It's just not the system which works, it has to be the whole ecosystem which needs to work. So those were the basic challenges that we faced during the time period of pandemic. And it is very important that this whole challenge gets culturally imbibed. Everybody starts living, breathing the same thing. Otherwise, we have another unique problem to figure out. So as and when the stores opened, the business was back to normal. And it's just like a kid. The moment you get back your favorite toy, you forget the new toy. So this omnichannel thing, which was so well entrenched into the blood for survival, had to be sustained and eventually made profitable. So that was another challenge which I think a lot of retailers must have faced.
So I think on that note, Naveen, I would like to bounce this with you. You are running Green Honchos, which is essentially, helping almost close to 100 brands scale, right? Now this whole D2C gold rush that you have seen, how do you see that panning out, and what's the way forward for those brands, especially in the digital space?
Yeah, thanks for bringing me in here. We represent the e-commerce side of the landscape, which is more the e-retail. So within that domain of specialization, I think I'd like to count out few changes, since we're talking about change in the marketing landscape. Clearly, from a highly marketplace-driven approach, it's now balanced off or probably tilting the other side to become what you're calling a D2C rush. So one big change was that by itself. But alongside that, I also have seen, a huge push towards diversification of channels. Earlier, it was all about circumspect and saying, okay, let's just look at ROAS or return on ad spend and only put as much money as is required for your D2C to scale. But I think now the long-term realization has come in that it is a journey from content to commerce. I was speaking about that to a few yesterday. It's not just, you can't just keep going by pumping in more performance marketing ad money. You would have to create more brand language around it and content. In the previous panel to ours also, they're talking about as a differentiator, the quality of content that you put out, whether it is just in terms of visuals, graphics, imagery, detailing, all are enablers to conversion. It wasn't as mission critical a couple of years back maybe, but now I think that's the on-site VM that is hugely changing, and you would see the brands that we know as success stories have a higher play in this area now than the others. Last couple of things is in this when you go to marketing, then obviously the end goal is sales. Earlier we saw a lot of from a fashion perspective OSM or all season merchandise selling, and it was all about long tail. I think a lot of brands are now really thinking sales as they would in offline. There's a lot of focus on actually top of the funnel, middle of the funnel, and bottom of the funnel. And accordingly, there are separate initiatives for new season merchandise or new arrivals, which is a huge shift from that entire mindset earlier. Last but not the least, in terms of changes, we're seeing that personalization in marketing is playing a much bigger role, which is very user specific or user group specific or behavior specific. It's not mass marketing. It is not spray and pray just because digital can allow you to do that. It has become fairly focused in terms of actually churning through every stage of the journey of the consumer in funnels and having actual roadmaps to engage with each part of the funnel. So those are some of my observations.
So Naveen, one change which I see was that, in the last 2 years, people thought Martech was good to be in the space. But this pandemic made it need to be in that space. And whenever the necessity comes in, it's a mother of invention.
Sure.
So all that, flowery and good to do things became mandatory for people. And it was a mode of a survival.
Sure.
And that is what is happening now. And now the whole core is how do we use Martech and make the business profitable and not just, sustaining it through a heavy kind of a discounting or a promotion or bringing in some innovations, which are there. It needs to be sustainable. Every business has a core necessity of being profitable. So that is a journey that the Martech is, looking forward to do now.
So I'm so glad, Naveen, you touched upon that, because my next question is actually $1 million one. And this is something which I'm sure most brands who are trying to build scale are facing this question. So there is this big fight that marketers have, which is, now that you're present across channels, right? How do you create the right balance between brand marketing, which is, increase in share of voice, and performance marketing? Because thanks to performance marketing, the first thing people say, okay, I've put this much money, how do I get back, right? But the downside of that is you'd end up doing a lot of tactical campaigns, and your brand recall does not necessarily get built, especially brands who have not yet become household names, right? So this is something which I'm very intrigued. I would like to know what's the right balance. As a marketer, I would be interested in knowing that. And maybe Ninad, if you can just give me throw some light in terms of how did you manage and what you think is the right balance.
I think that's a favorite topic of mine.
Okay.
Because I've spent fairly a lot of time engaging in it as well as thinking about it, especially because the times are changing. I think every marketing is performance marketing. It's a complete misnomer that there is something called as pure brand marketing, because I am completely against those kind of campaigns which which just spread the message where the creative is appreciated, becomes memorable, but nobody understands what is the message. Because at the end of every communication, there has to be a sales message. That's the business that we are in. A lot of people just build some kind of messaging which goes viral, but nobody goes and buys anything out of it. So to my mind, every marketing has to be performance marketing. That's the first point. The other thing is striking a balance. I don't know whether my first answer answers it all. There is no balance. It has to be all performance marketing. But there is, in creativity, there is no one way to do things, right? You may find, let's say that a dove test of hanging a hair strand by a dumbbell will make for a great social media post, and you create a GIF out of it, and that might make women click to understand how strong it makes their hair. On the other hand, a shot of 10 women with multiple hairstyles, multiple body types, multiple ways to dress, that might entice someone to click and say, okay, I like the overall world that this brand is creating. So I don't think there is one way to do it. But the answer to that question is that every marketing has to be performance marketing. There is no role for just creating a nice fuzzy world of emotion and sentiment. That's not the business of marketing.
So maybe Ayan, I would like to hear your point of view on this.
So I think there has to be a certain kind of balance because see when there's a brand, right, the brand has it has to perform. So like every brand needs to perform and performance also reflects on the brand. So they are vice versa. So you can say that in a way you can say all brand marketing is performance marketing or all performance marketing is brand marketing because at the end of the day they reflect the same thing. They reflect the brand's performance, what the brand stands for. And I feel like it's more about at the time of like your overall brand strategy, how you actually implement it because a brand is something that's remembered for a lifetime. Performance is something that comes and goes, you know. Everyone can't be at peak performance all the time. Sometimes brands need to know when to also pull back if the competition is too high and when to strike again. So a brand and like how it performs has to fit in with like the overall strategy, the understanding of the market, what's coming up, what's not coming up. Say if there are too many bigger players in the field going in for the kill, it may make sense to like stay back and wait for the next moment to enter the market and then make the kill then because that's when they are all out of fuel. So it's also about how you actually strategize about where these things come into place in the larger scheme of things.
I think the other thing to keep in mind there is I don't think there is a standard answer that every brand will have for that. It depends on where you are in your journey of maturity because, you know, at the end of the day, there's a purchase funnel, there's awareness, consideration, purchase. Those are the three things you need to drive. Now, if you are a brand which has huge, like say if you're a Myntra, everybody knows about you already. So you're probably going to be much more about driving the consideration. So you do more middle of funnel, bottom funnel, which is more performance marketing. Whereas if you're, say, a new brand or a brand, especially in the online space, if you're still not known to many consumers, then a lot of top of the funnel brand building communication will probably be a bigger priority. So I think it is also a function of where as a brand you are in that journey.
So I agree with Vivek.
Yeah, so I was going to say the exact same thing. The reality is, I mean, every marketing is performance, but which part of the consumer's journey you're trying to target? Are you trying to target the mind? Are you trying to target the action? So, you know, awareness, interest, desire, action, right? So that's really critical to understand. And many times you could be around for a very, very long time, but sometimes you got to reinvent. And that reinvention may mean that, you know, I may have a base, I may do performance in a certain space, but I may still kind of take a call to prioritize a new reinvention conversation with the consumer because, you know, the brand's got to stay for hundreds of years. I mean, you're not talking about a 10-year journey, right? So you've got to that entire piece boils down to the fact that where you're on a journey and how aware are you of what your consumer believes where you're on the journey. I think these are the two things that kind of help you balance that. There's no, I don't know there's a fixed formula.
So I kind of resonate to that. In fact, my own experience, when you're on Instagram and you know you have 10 new brands that are thrown in your direction and you kind of click onto one of them, you even convert, you end up buying. So that's performance marketing, ended up in a conversion. But when you're making, and this has happened with me, so when I was making a repeat purchase of that, I forgot where did I buy it from because, you know, you're introduced to so many new brands every day, you just forget, okay, this was something which I picked up from which brand, right? So then you go to your in-mail and you look at order confirmed and, you know, try to see where is it that. So I guess somewhere a little bit of brand marketing is equally essential. But I completely agree to what Ninad said, which is, end of the day, it has to, lead to a certain performance. That performance metric can be different for every brand. True. And that brings me,
sorry, if I may add one more thing. And, you know, many times it does happen to all of us.
Yeah.
That you kind of bucket channels of communication on whether it is performance, whether it is, you know, share of voice, share of wallet story. And this is something that came to me from a startup, not in our space of fashion or lifestyle. Ordered a product, saw it on a TV show and said, let me try this. And I realized that the usage of traditional performance marketing spaces were so well used by them to communicate their brand story to me. And you know, simple things like emailers, which is
Yeah.
Classic
Absolutely.
performance.
Yeah.
And when I read that mail, I was thinking that, boss, this person who's probably not educated beyond 12 standard is able to do brand marketing using a performance marketing tool
Yeah.
in such a beautiful way.
Sure, sure, absolutely. In fact, that brings me to my next question, which is like, given that now channels which are converging, you have multiple channels, traditional brands going online, omni-channel, consumer journey across channels, which you are mapping, Martech being used to intervene at every point, right? What are the key KPIs that you have started measuring today, which you were earlier not measuring perhaps? So, anything which on account of the channels merging, are there some new KPIs that have emerged which kind of you started monitoring? I mean, it's open to anybody to answer if, maybe Amit, you would like to answer.
I'll take it up from Vivek. He was saying that, there's some people who are doing a lot of performance marketing without having the core knowledge. And I'm telling you, this is the world of Martech. Okay, the Martech is one which is bringing across predictive analytics. It is bringing in the machine learning. It is bringing in the artificial intelligence. And it is bringing you the data in a certain format, in a dashboard format, which is easily readable. And any person who understands business knows the KPIs that he needs to watch out for. See, for example, it just yesterday, somebody was mentioning that, the business is growing. But the business in a retail or a fashion market is not growing because of the quantities. It is growing because of the ASP increase. It's basically the inflation getting adjusted into the cost price, and hence you can see an average sale price of a garment going up, and hence the business is growing. So for a marketer, it means he's not been able to bring in enough walk-ins into the store, or he's been not able to get enough eyeballs to the website, or an app through which the sales are happening. So KPIs are pretty important, and now the older KPIs of ROI and all are gone in the past. Here you're looking at complete customers' life cycle within a system, and hence new KPIs which have come up. Every business has their own lingo, so I won't say about those lingos because we make develop our own words. But that is the drastic change which has come across in KPI monitoring.
I think specifically in the context of this, the omni world that we are now living in, I think what is important is to keep a close eye on, we are putting in all of these omni initiatives and ways to cross-connect consumers between online and offline, but the new KPIs are really around, is that really happening? So what percentage of my vast offline database has actually come and shopped with me on my online platform? What percent of the people who are coming and shopping with me online were my existing, CRM customers? When they are changing from one channel to another, is their behavior changing? Are they shopping more categories? Is their bill value going up? So I think understanding those network effects of these omni customers and to what extent I'm being able to drive that omni behavior is an important way of measuring whether this is just a good to do, everyone has omni so I must have it, or is it actually helping me to change consumer behavior?
Yeah, I agree with that. Actually, just to add on to that, so like with the omni-channel, right? Each channel has its own output and like targets its own kind of market. So the KPI for each channel changes. For example, with social media, it's something, and with physical stores, it's completely else, right? So the thing is, like for a brand, I think understanding like your consumer and how like they react to each of these channels is really important, because it is not necessary that like each individual omni-channel like gives you a certain amount of like commercial generation, but maybe one channel is way stronger than the others in terms of promotion. And then you can use that channel more prioritized for promotion to help the other channels benefit in proportion to that.
Yeah, yeah.
I think what this is also enabling is, performance marketing and measurement even at the trade level.
Sorry,
At the trade level,
Okay.
for someone who's a traditional marketer like us, and we rely a lot on our traditional channel, which is the multi-brand outlet, the small shops that sell your underwear, t-shirts, stuff like that. What we've started doing is that we've started also measuring how much is the retailer responding to our Martech interventions. So let's suppose if we are using WhatsApp to engage him, if we are using any other means, to even track and monitor how our visual merchandising is faring. So I think the KPIs are shifting not just at the consumer level, they are also shifting at the trade level.
Yes.
Yeah, I think everyone's coming on this question.
Yes.
So I think you mentioned the word KPIs. I wanted to get back on that one. With this entire, multi-channel, multi-device, targeting of consumers and businesses having to interact with consumers across different touch points rather than only the ad or the website, I think that unification has brought about other KPIs like quality of traffic through other sources, because even visitors now have diversified channels of coming to a website. Because earlier, top of the funnel was only built through probably Facebook, Instagram being the lion's share. But now there are, other channels like affiliate, obviously influencers, a lot of brands here do great jobs with them. And with those diverse channels comes that metric of quality of traffic. And the other one, because now businesses have even grown beyond a point where the traditional KPI of SOV or share of voice is becoming critical, because to be able to increase share of voice, your marketing strategy across digital or traditional will have to change. So we've seen that emerge as a trend too, especially in the mid-segment market.
So, maybe, Naveen, I would like to ask you this question, which is about customer date, which is like supposed to be a very, huge value proposition. Can you hear me?
Wait, you'll have to say that again.
Sorry, I was saying customer date. Customer data, which is on a huge value proposition, which is coming, how will we be owning it, and when it comes to owning the customer data. So, how are businesses handling this space in terms of unification? So, to your earlier point, if you can just extend that point and tell us a little bit about the unification aspect of it.
Sure, I think it's a very similar concept, whether it's offline or online. It's the traditional MBO versus EBO there, and it's your marketplace versus your D2C here. I think it's a movement. Everyone loves the MBO, everyone loves the marketplace, and then over time you want to own the customer to be able to mine and churn more of the consumer data. In one of the panels yesterday, one of the panelists was saying there's a lot between the first purchase and the second purchase in terms of communications that you'd want to do with the consumer, which is where possibly loyalty comes in. Otherwise, in such a cluttered D2C space that is all pretty much serving up ads on one handheld with very minimal viewport and attention span as well, I think it's extremely critical for brands to figure out what those communications are across the channels. So going back to that question, I do believe trying to map each part of the journey across all the devices where the consumer is present and across wherever your catalog is present, and trying to serve unique experiences to consumers. I think AI is slightly distant to do well in terms of using data, but machine learning and the amount of cohorts of information that is available, and I'll talk a lot more on the digital side because I understand that a lot more. I think there is proper segmentation possibilities at different parts of the journey, and each has its own method. So we believe that the power of data assimilation and having different expectations from different portions of the funnel in terms of the other funnel metrics like add to cart and cart to conversion, and not paintbrushing it all into saying, okay, all should have the same conversion, new versus repeat, OSM versus NSM, what it takes. I feel that data has been able to empower a lot of brands that have gone on the D2C journey because only we are ownership of that first party data.
So, Rohini, would you like to add something here?
Yeah, I think it's very important to have one view of the customer, because very often what ends up happening is there are many touch points that you have with the customer on your website, at the store, when they give you feedback on your NPS survey form, and all of those very often go into silos. And you are not able to get a one view. So, like for example, at the Landmark Group, what we've done is everything is linked to the mobile number. Our e-commerce is a mobile login. Of course, when you buy at the store, you're on the CRM programs, we get your number there. We also have a virtual assistant at store, which up to 15 to 20% of our customers now use. We call it Buddy. Again, there we get, their number there as well. When we send them an NPS survey, again, that's linked back to their number. So now I have a lot of data about this consumer, not just what they bought, which is what we always had with the CRM, but now I know what did they browse, what are the offers they checked out on my virtual assistant. So therefore, I know what are the categories they're interested in, where if they look for missing size on some products, I get I get an idea of where am I losing out on sizes. If I can connect it also back to feedback that same customer has given me on my NPS form, I'm able to get a one unified view of this customer, which is not just millions of data points, or not millions, but for any one consumer, tens of data points that he might have left as a breadcrumb trail. But how do we bring together all those breadcrumbs to get a full view of our customer, and therefore then be able to design better ways to reach and sell to him or her?
Yeah.
I have a perspective on consumer data and segmentation. Increasingly, what is happening is that with more reliance on hardcore numerical segmentation, if you see, a lot of the digital brands are looking like each other. I struggle to find differentiation. I struggle to find magic and imagination. Even the way the brands look, the way the brands talk, because they are accessing that same data, and they are trying to build something based only on data. And that data is behavioral data. Now, in brand building and marketing, there is behavioral data, there is attitudinal data. Most good brands are built on attitudinal data, and then you use behavioral data to market again and again to them, right? But brand building has to happen on attitudinal data. That's the reason why, you will struggle to find brands that are sharply defined. Let's say a Royal Enfield is a sharply defined brand for an attitudinal, segment. I see a lot of coldness happening in that territory, and I don't see any magical brand emerging in the D2C world. That's why you see even names are very unimaginative. I will not take any names, but there are unimaginative names that are being peddled as brand names.
So
Yes.
can I
Yes,
just add something?
please.
What you said is very, very relevant, because in this, and that's exactly the space where the art side of thinking and marketing really comes in. That what your brand essence is about. Where are you pivoting? You've got to pivot. You can't pivot on a data and saying that, okay, this is a need. These are the 5 need gaps available, and that's available to everyone, right? As an information, and you can go and plug in. That's product play. That's a D2C product. It's not a D2C brand, like you said. And I kind of agree with you that most of them look very, very similar in many spaces. Certain part of this entire brand journey is irrespective of digital or pre-digital and whatever happens next with Meta and all of that. One aspect will not change. What is your essence of the brand? What's your core? That entire brand key is still about what stays between the 2 ears of the consumer, right? And if we're fixing that, my content is going to be mine. Like you said, Royal Enfield. Royal Enfield is not going to look any different any day. It is what it is. And you can see more brands in other categories in that space, which have kind of, despite really adopting a lot of digital things, they haven't moved away from the core of the brand. Now that's a word of caution for all of us. In this entire endeavor of trying to say, hey, can I do this? Get a quick growth, quick sale, acquire new consumers, get a new geography, and all of that is great. But what was the purpose you started the brand for?
Sure. So in fact, you named Royal Enfield, and I was just thinking, what does one do given the gold rush that's happening on D2C? It's essentially around apparel. It's essentially around health food. So I guess it's extremely important to create a very unique story for yourself to be able to stand out, Otherwise, you're essentially targeting the same customer and the same kind of messaging, the same kind of tools, etc., etc.
I mean, there are still brands that are doing, like Zomato is a very well-built brand
yes.
in this, world. So it's not that, that is not happening at all. But I'm seeing increasingly there are instances of,
Sure.
coldness happening there.
Absolutely. In fact, I would like to ask one question, which is, your entire consumer journey shift that's happened, physical, online. Obviously, your Martech stack would have changed, right? And where do you think, I mean, if you can just share some insights in terms of what kind of Martech stack is it that you are now deploying for yourself across the complete journey, which is your acquisition, your engagement, your retention, you know, managing churn, if there's anything that you would like to share. And it's open for anybody to take on. Maybe, Ayan, you can start. Okay, cool. Anybody who would like to?
By default, I think it'll come to the service provider. But see, I think in terms of the tech stack, the top of the funnel is your usual suspects of traffic. Everyone would like organic and direct to be as high as it is for a Shein, but that's not the landscape for the rest of the brands. It would be great if there's less paid and more, other forms of media. But you use your standard Facebook, Instagram, Google, third-party, publisher networks, etc. That's part of the tech stack that is not owned, but it is, earned. After that, I think once it comes onto the website or once you're able to, bring visitors, I do believe that there are quite a few solutions available that are in the Martech space, and I'm happy to name almost all our collaborators here, whether it is a WebEngage, a MoEngage, a Netcore, a CleverTap, Zeno's here, Wixo. There are 5 or 6 of them, and that's all because there is a top of the funnel conversion that is anyway the brands have paid for. But then, there is exit intent and there are other forms of journeys which is pretty much revenue lying on the table, which is where AI and the journeys come into play. There is, WhatsApp, there is other forms of communication, obviously trigger emails. There are a lot of service providers, again, even here and elsewhere, that now have become essential to the stack. I also believe that there's an interesting play out there of fraud detection, because in the entire profitability landscape and RTO and COD, I think that becomes a huge value proposition. So there are a couple of fraud detection tools that are now part of the default stack. Then there is also the BNPL, which is the buy now, pay later. And I'm just going through the journey of a customer. It does make an impact. We feel that, clearly COD is here to stay for a long time and going to be a majority. But even if we're able to save anything through BNPL, I think it does make a difference, and I've seen it making a positive difference. Even the checkout pages now have products by themselves. There are 3 or 4 of, collaborators that are able to just use a headless checkout that has higher conversions from an experience, more simpler user experience than some of the standard SaaS platforms. And then it comes to, basically even looking at deeper logistics integrations through third parties. Deeper logistics integrations could mean that there is on-the-fly PIN code serviceability check, both at the geographic level as well as the user level itself, at the network level. So there's a lot of tech in the marketing stack that is actually come into play to ensure that the gross return on ad spend is as close as possible to the net return on ad spend. Because I think that's where the cookie crumbles in most cases when it comes to D2C. And I guess the more folks like us and brands are able to understand that and flatten the realization from the top to the end in the P&L, the faster and easier it is for even traditional brands to scale up their own D2C.
Anyone would like to
One
add
interesting thing which came out in this whole conversation is, in every head that Naveen mentioned, is a separate subject matter expert or a separate agency.
Yeah.
So a marketer's role is completely changed. Now he needs to be not a subject matter expert in terms of creativity and stuff. He needs to be a jack of all and master of some. And that is where the real skill set of a collaborator comes into the picture, of coordinating with all this uniquely agencies which are bringing across a certain value on the table and try and get the best recipe out of it.
Sure. In
That's
fact,
also getting very tiring for marketers.
yes, I was just going to ask you because Ninad, you spoke to me about it in the speakers lounge, and maybe you would like to just share some of the challenges that you face on that front. Yeah. And if the audience or anyone would like to add some thoughts on that.
I think I don't have a solution, but I'm just going to talk about the challenges that we face. Today, a marketer has to, talk to, engage with, inspire, get good work out of so many various agencies. Earlier there used to be one creative agency, one media agency, and maybe a PR agency once in a while. Now within digital, there is a social media expert, there is a website expert, there is a e-commerce agency, there are agencies that specialize only in helping you listing and cataloging, and just interacting with all of them it sometimes gets very, very exhausting. And one agency can't do the job of the other. Even if it is one agency, you'll have to talk to 10 teams because these are all specialized. Maybe one of the things that can happen is at the marketer's end, there could be division of labor and there could be segmentation where it is not just one marketing department, but let's say there are 3-4 sub departments and then they take care of all of it.
Process of evolution, what marketing department was like even 5 years back to what it is today. I think there's a complete change. So anyone who can just perhaps throw some light in terms of plausible solutions for Ninad on this?
The only plausible solution is we need to think like an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
It's our own business and how do we make the most out of it. So typically a marketer's role has changed from just doing a marketing, but to be a real growth driver. Yeah. And it's about understanding the holistic system and then try and create an ecosystem which delivers that value. So that is the solution. It's easier said than done. One needs to actually spend and toil his sweat, and get the result out of it. There is no perfect formula for it. It is all about your experience, your knowledge, your collaboration skills, because each agency is unique and will have its own touch points which can trigger any kind of an emotion. So it's a very tricky affair. There is no guaranteed formula of success. But yes, with experience, with a certain amount of inclination to deliver results and growth, you should be able to deliver it.
Sure. Yeah.
In a nutshell, is it CMO or the growth head? I mean, we've got to really rethink that. What's your role? I mean, are you really about just bringing the consumer in the store or your website, or you really owning the number up? And you keep seeing these green shoots sometimes in very, very small projects within your teams that there are guys who are thinking like growth hackers, and that is what is going to probably give us all solutions over the next, I don't know, I wouldn't say 5 years because I think life's changing much faster.
Sure. Yes.
I think, not a short solution, but one thing that is really important, like for brands to stay on the ball is, one, you got to serve the trends and you need to serve the technology, because these are two things that are constantly updating and changing. Especially with every new channel, there's a new trend and there's a new technology and there's a new format to follow, and it's not always possible for brands to be able to in-house meet these expectations. Yes. Or build their teams, because maybe it's not worth the expense to get an entire in-house team to work on a certain channel. That's when it's really important to actually start collaborating with other brands, other agencies, because that's how you actually create something meaningful. You can only be an expert in certain things, and to know where you're not the expert, you bring the experts in, because that's what makes you look like one.
Sure. In fact, I remember, I'd just like to add my own experience in this. When I was handling a B2C brand around 5 years back, and I had exactly a similar problem. And, I reached out to my network, and one of the things, I got a very solid advice from one of the CMOs who said that, he's divided the complete organization into 3 parts, the marketing organization into 3 parts, and one was a solid Martech team, right? And the Martech team had, essentially a completely different skill set which he mandated, where each one of them came from a tech background, right? And the brand marketing team was, of course, more in terms of creativity and communication and stuff like that. And then there was a separate digital team, which was essentially driving growth. So I guess there's no right answer to this, but maybe a combination of things that one can learn. I think we have already overshot time, so we will stop. Any questions? I'll just open it for questions or whatever. Yes. No questions, so I guess that brings us to the
I
end
think
of
the
session.
panel was so elaborative that there are no questions.
Thank you. So thanks a lot, guys. Thank you so much for staying on.